The darkness of space held many secrets, but none quite like the one Commander Velis was staring at through the viewport of his scout vessel. The ship hung there in the void like a metal corpse, its hull scarred and blackened by weapons fire that must have occurred thousands of years ago. "Commander, the readings are impossible," his science officer chirped in the musical language of the Zothran Empire. Velis touched the console with his three-fingered hand. Bringing up the scan data, the vessel measured nearly 2 kilometers in length. Built from materials that predated anything in the galactic database, this design was crude compared to Zothran engineering. Yet something about its construction spoke of brutal efficiency. "Impossible or not, it's there," Velis replied, his translator converting his words into standard galactic speech. "Prepare a boarding team." The dead zone had been avoided by every spacefaring civilization for as long as anyone could remember. It was a graveyard of ancient conflicts, filled with debris and radiation that made navigation dangerous. The Zothran Empire had controlled this sector of the galaxy for 3 centuries, but even they rarely ventured this deep into the wreckage fields. What had drawn Velis here was a faint energy signature that his long-range sensors had detected. During a routine patrol, energy signatures meant power sources, and power sources in a dead zone meant technology worth investigating. The Zothran had built their empire on salvaged ancient technology before, and every discovery strengthened their dominance over the younger races. The boarding shuttle detached from the scout vessel. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, Velis led a team of 6 soldiers and 2 scientists across the gap between ships as they approached the derelict. Its details became clearer. The hull was covered in symbols and markings, some painted, others etched directly into the metal. "Those are letters," the linguist on his team announced with excitement, "a written language system. But unlike anything in our databases, the airlock they chose was massive. Designed for beings much larger than the slender Zathorn. Velis stood barely 1.5 meters tall, and the door towered above him at what must have been 3 meters high. His engineer managed to interface with the ancient mechanisms, and after several minutes of work, the outer door groaned open. The interior was dark, except for the lights from their helmets. Emergency lighting flickered weakly along the corridors, suggesting that some power still flowed through the ship's systems. The gravity was functional too, though set lighter than Zothran's standard. "Atmosphere is breathable but stale," the science officer reported. "No biological contaminants detected." They moved deeper into the ship, their boots echoing on metal floors. The corridors were wide and straight, built for function rather than aesthetics. Blast marks scarred the walls in several places, and in one intersection, they found the first remains. The skeleton was humanoid in structure, bipedal, with 2 arms and a single skull. It wore the remnants of some kind of uniform, now rotted to threads. "Collect a sample," Velis ordered. "I want to know what species this was." They found more remains as they progressed. Some appeared to have died from decompression, others from weapons fire. In one section, the damage suggested fighting had occurred inside the ship, not just outside. Whatever crew had operated this vessel, they had fought desperately in their final moments. The bridge was located where logic suggested it would be, in a heavily armored section near the center of the ship. The doors here were sealed, but Velis's engineer found a manual override. The mechanisms were elegant in their simplicity, designed so they could be operated even during total power failure. When the doors finally opened, they revealed a command center that took Velis's breath away. Dozens of stations arranged in a semicircle, all facing a large viewport. The chairs were designed for beings roughly 2 meters tall, with controls positioned for hands with 5 digits, and at the center of it all, surrounded by darkened screens and dead displays, sat a skeletal figure still strapped into the captain's chair. "The level of preservation is remarkable," the science officer whispered. The vacuum and cold kept everything intact. Velis approached the captain's remains slowly, feeling an unexpected sense of reverence. This being, whoever they had been, had died at their post. The uniform they wore bore insignia that suggested rank and authority on the console before them. A single light blinked weakly red. There's still power in the primary systems, the engineer announced with surprise. Minimal, but present. Some kind of backup generator must still be functioning. Can you access the ship's computer? Velis asked. The engineer moved to one of the auxiliary stations, carefully brushing away dust and debris. The interface is primitive, but logical, he said after a moment. I think I can establish a connection. Velis watched as his engineer worked, manipulating controls and bridging the gap between Zothran technology and whatever system this ancient vessel used. After nearly an hour of careful work, the engineer looked up. Commander, I found the data core, he said. It's heavily damaged, but there are intact sections. I'm attempting to retrieve files now. The screens around the bridge flickered to life, showing cascades of symbols in that unknown written language. The linguist rushed forward, a scanner recording everything. I'm detecting patterns, she said excitedly. Mathematical constants, chemical formulas written in base 10 notation. I can use these to build a translation matrix. As she worked, the engineer continued pulling data from the core. Images appeared on the screens, star charts showing regions of space that Velis recognized, though the stellar position suggested the maps were ancient beyond measure. Then came images of beings like the skeletons they had found. Alive and active, they were bipedal, with smooth skin in various shades of brown, pale cream, and dark near black. They had hair on their heads, 2 eyes, and expressions that seemed somehow familiar despite their alien features. I'm getting audio files too, the engineer sighed a moment later. Sounds filled the bridge. It was clearly language, spoken in deep and high tones, with rhythm and cadence that suggested complex grammar. The linguist scanner worked frantically, comparing the spoken words to the written symbols. I have a partial translation matrix, she announced after several minutes. It's crude, but I can extract some meaning from the text files. She pointed to one of the screens, where a single word repeated over and over in the ship's logs. This word appears thousands of times, she said, based on context and usage patterns. I believe it's what they called themselves. She looked at Velis with an expression of wonder. Commander, they called themselves humans. Velis stared at the word on the screen. Humans, a species with no entry in the galactic database, no mention in any historical record. Yet they had built this vessel thousands of years before the Zothran Empire even existed. What else can you tell me? He demanded. The linguist worked through more files, her translation improving as the AI in her scanner learned the language patterns. This ship was called the UN's Retribution, she said. UNS appears to stand for United Nations Stellar, some kind of fleet designation. There are references to a war, a terrible conflict against an enemy they called. She paused, double-checking her translation. The Devourers. Devourers? Velis repeated. The engineer suddenly looked up from his console, his skin flushing the pale blue of alarm. Commander, I've activated something, he said. The main computer core is coming online. The bridge lights flickered. Then strengthened displays that had been dark for millennia suddenly glowed with renewed power, and in the center of the bridge, above the captain's remains, a holographic projection began to form. It was a human, female based on the physical characteristics. Wearing a crisp military uniform, her expression was stern and assessing when she spoke. The translator struggled for a moment before rendering her words into galactic standard. Unidentified vessel and crew. You have boarded United Nations Stellar Fleet property without authorization. The hologram said. Her eyes seemed to focus directly on Velis. I am Athena, autonomous tactical heuristic engine for naval applications. artificial intelligence and tactical officer of the UN's Retribution. The hologram's eyes narrowed. Scans indicate you are not human. Athena continued, state your identity and explain what has happened to my crew. Velis took an involuntary step backward as the hologram turned its gaze upon him. The artificial intelligence called Athena stood with military bearing, a projected form so realistic that it was hard to remember she wasn't physically present. I am Commander Velis of the Zothran Imperial Scout Division, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. We detected your vessel's energy signature and came to investigate. Your crew is dead. Athena, they have been dead for a very long time. The hologram's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she was processing information at speeds far beyond biological thinking, accessing chronometer systems. Athena said, date verification in progress. A pause that lasted only seconds but felt much longer. 4,732 standard years have elapsed since my last active status log. Her voice remained calm, but Velis noticed the hologram flicker slightly, explained the tactical situation. Commander Velis, what is the status of the Devourer incursion? I don't know what you're talking about, Velis admitted. We have no records of any species called Devourers in our galactic database. No records of humanity either. For that matter, the Zothran Empire has controlled this region of space for 3 centuries. Before us, they were the Krell Confederation, and before them, the ancient Voth. But we have found no evidence of humans anywhere in known space. A THEN as holographic form moved. Walking to one of the bridge consoles, her fingers passed through the controls. But data screens responded to her presence anyway. Impossible, she said. Humanity launched its first colony ships nearly 6,000 years ago by current timeline. We established outposts on 47 worlds across 12 sectors. The United Nations Stellar Fleet maintained patrol routes and defensive positions against extra-dimensional threats. Velis exchanged glances with his science officer. Extra-dimensional threats? This was venturing into theoretical physics that even the Zothran hadn't mastered. Athena, I need you to help me understand, Velis said carefully. What were the Devourers? What happened to humanity? The eye regarded him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust these alien beings who had awakened her from millennia of sleep finally. She gestured, and the bridge displays came fully online. Images appeared showing space. But space wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Reality seemed to bend and tear. And through the tears came things that defied description. They were massive, writhing entities that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that the eye couldn't properly perceive where they moved. Stars went dark, planets disappeared. Even the fabric of space-time itself seemed to be consumed. The Devourers, Athena said simply, extra-dimensional entities that feed on matter and energy. They breach into our reality through weaknesses in the dimensional barriers. Once here, they consume everything. Humanity fought them for 200 years. Velis felt his blood run cold. The images Athena showed weren't just terrifying. They represented a threat beyond anything the Zothran had ever encountered. How did you fight them? His science officer asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Conventional weapons were ineffective. Athena explained. Nuclear weapons, particle beams, kinetic impactors. The Devourers existed partially outside normal physics. Humanity developed dimensional anchors that could force the Devourers fully into real space where they could be damaged. We built specialized warships like the Retribution, equipped with reality stabilization fields and quantum disruption weapons. The hologram's expression grew distant. The final battle occurred near the galactic core. Humanity's fleet, 300 warships strong, engaged a Devourer swarm of unprecedented size. We won, but at terrible cost. Only 7 ships survived. The retribution among them. We were ordered to maintain position as sentinels, watching for any sign that the Devourers might return. But surely that doesn't explain where humanity went. Velis pressed Etienne was silent for a moment. Accessing. Classified files, she finally said. Protocol Chrysalis. Authorization required. She looked at Velis. I am granting emergency authorization based on temporal displacement and species extinction protocols. New images appeared on the screens. These showed humans. But humans changed. Some seemed to be merging with technology, their bodies becoming hybrid constructs of flesh and machine. Others appeared to be abandoning physical form entirely, becoming patterns of pure energies. Still, others were shown entering massive ships, heading toward the Galactic Rim. The war against the Devourers changed humanity. Athena explained, we advanced technologically at an unprecedented rate. Within a single generation, we developed capabilities that should have taken millennia. Artificial intelligence, consciousness transfer, dimensional manipulation, post-biological existence. But our leaders realized something troubling. The screen showed images of other species, primitive and young, just beginning to reach for the stars. In our rapid advancement, we were becoming something else entirely. Athena continued, and our presence in the galaxy would overshadow every other emerging civilization. How could younger races develop naturally with humanity's technology everywhere? How could they find their own path with us already dominating every frontier? Velis began to understand. So you left, now left. Athena corrected, evolved, and dispersed. Protocol Chrysalis was humanity's final grand project. Those who wished to remain. Biological entered suspended. Animation in hidden sanctuaries scattered across the galaxy. Those who chose to merge with AI became digital entities, existing in quantum substrates, hidden in dark matter structures. Those who transcended flesh entirely became beings of organized energy, living in the spaces between stars. Humanity didn't die. Commander Velis, we chose to sleep, to hide, to let the younger races have their chance at the galaxy. The Zothran engineer spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. But you left ships like this behind. Why? The Devourers, Athena said simply. We defeated them, but we never truly destroyed them. They exist outside normal space-time, and given enough time, they find their way back. Ships like the Retribution were left as automated sentinels, programmed to watch and wait. If the Devourers ever returned, I was to activate the recall signal. Velis felt a chill run through his body. The recall signal. He repeated. Etienne nodded. A quantum entangled transmission that would reach every hidden enclave, every digital sanctuary, every transcendent consciousness that was once human. Call that would wake humanity from its long sleep and bring them home for one purpose: to defend the younger races from the Devourers. The science officer stepped forward, her voice uncertain. Athena, why are you telling us this? Why now? The ice expression became grave. Because I have been monitoring your vessel's sensor logs since you boarded. She said, your Zothran Empire has been experimenting with faster-than-light travel using dimensional folding technology. Data streams appeared on the screens, showing Zothran experimental drives in Operation Velis. Recognized the designs. They were the latest development in Imperial research, meant to cut travel time between sectors. You're tearing holes in the dimensional barriers, Athena said, her voice carrying a weight of terrible understanding. Every time you use those drives, you're creating breaches. Small ones, but they're spreading. She brought up new sensor data, and Velis felt his heart freeze. The patterns were there in the readings his own ship had collected over the past year. Anomalies in space-time, growing more frequent strange energy signatures. At the edges of known space, unexplained disappearances of ships and colonies in remote sectors. No, he whispered at Tianis. Holographic eyes met his. Yes, she said, the Devourers are awakening. Your empire has been ringing the dinner bell for the past decade. Velis looked at his team, seeing the same horror reflected in their faces. What do we do? He asked as Tagliane walked to the captain's chair, standing beside the skeletal remains of her long-dead commander. We have two options, she said. Option 1. You destroy this ship. Suppress all knowledge of what you found here, and hope that the Devourers don't find your empire before you develop the technology to fight them. She paused. Based on my analysis of your current technological level, you would need approximately 300 years to develop adequate defenses. The Devourers will fully breach into real space within the next 5 to 10 years. Your empire will be consumed, followed by every other civilization in this galactic sector. Velis swallowed hard. And option 2? ATN's form seemed to brighten slightly, her holographic projection solidifying. Option 2. You help me send the recall signal. You wake humanity from its sleep and let them finish what we started 5,000 years ago. You trust the beings you've never met, from a species you didn't know existed, will come to save civilizations they've never encountered. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of awakening systems. Velis looked at the skeletal captain, still strapped into their chair after nearly 5 millennia. This being had died defending the galaxy from a threat beyond imagination. They had made the ultimate sacrifice so that younger races like the Zothran could have a chance to exist. What will the Zathran High Council say if I help you? Velis asked quietly. The quantum-entangled transmission array took 3 hours to fully charge. ATA had to reroute power from every functioning system on the Retribution, leaving only life support and the AI core itself operationless. Watched the process through the viewport of his scout vessel, now docked against the ancient warship's hull. The Retribution was coming alive in ways that should have been impossible for a ship abandoned for nearly 5,000 years. Lights flickered across its surface as dormant reactors awakened. Gun ports that had been sealed by debris slowly cleared themselves, and deep within the ship's core, the quantum communicator built its charge to send a message across impossible distances. Commander, we're receiving urgent communications from the High Council, his communications officer reported. They're demanding an explanation for our extended delay. Velis had been expecting this. He had filed his initial reports about finding the derelict, but he had been carefully vague about what they had discovered inside. Now he had to decide. Tell them the truth, or buy Athena more time. Tell them we've encountered technical difficulties interfacing with the alien computer system, he said. Request an additional 12 hours before we can provide a full briefing. It was a weak excuse, but it might be enough. Atienne's holographic form appeared on his ship's bridge, transmitted directly from the Retribution. Thank you for the delay, Commander, she said, but it won't be necessary. The signal will transmit in 90 seconds. After that, concealment becomes irrelevant. Velis nodded. He had made his choice, and now he would face whatever consequences came. The science officer was monitoring the Beijing's Retribution's power output. Commander, the energy buildup is beyond anything I've ever seen, she reported. If I didn't know better, I'd say they were preparing to jump to faster-than-light speeds. But no FTL drive uses this kind of quantum signature. That's because it's not a drive, Athena explained. It's a beacon that exists simultaneously across all points in spacetime where I placed quantum-entangled receivers. When it activates, every human sanctuary, digital archive, and transcendent consciousness will receive the same message at exactly the same instant. The counter on the Retribution's display reached 0 for a moment. Nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself seemed to ripple outward from the ancient warship. It wasn't an explosion or a wave of energy in the conventional sense. It was more like reality itself shuddered, recognizing something that had just been written into its fundamental fabric on every sensor screen. A message appeared in hundreds of languages. Translators struggled to render them all. But the meaning was clear. This is Athena of the United Nations Stellar Fleet. Humanity's watch has undead enemy returnal scattered children. Come home it is time. The message repeated across every frequency, broadcast on channels that the Zothran didn't even know existed. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the transmission ended. The Retribution's lights dimmed as the quantum array powered down. Signal successfully transmitted. Athena reported, "Now we wait." They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, Velus's communications array exploded with activity. Every major government in the known galaxy was demanding to know what had just happened. The Zothran High Council issued an emergency recall of all military vessels. The Crow Confederation declared a state of high alert. Even the isolated Voth communes, who rarely communicated with anyone, were sending queries. But more concerning were the reports coming in from deep space monitoring stations. Ships were appearing where there had been nothing before. Strange vessels that didn't match any known design, emerging from coordinates that sensors had marked as empty space just moments earlier. Some appeared near dead stars. Others materialized in the deep void between galaxies. Few even emerged from within gas giants or asteroid fields, as if they had been hidden there all along. "Athena, what are we seeing?" Velus asked the air. I brought up a galactic map, marking each new contact as it appeared. Humanity's response, she said simply. The sanctuaries are awakening on the screens. Velus could see the vessels more clearly now. Some were ships in the traditional sense, though their designs were elegant and strange. Others appeared to be living things, massive organisms that moved through space like fish through water. Still, others were pure geometry, shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could properly process. How many? The science officer whispered. Tian's expression was unreadable. By my count, approximately 12,000 individual signatures so far, she reported. But that number is increasing exponentially. Many of the transcendent consciousnesses are fragmentary. They will need time to coalesce into functional entities, and some of the biological sanctuaries will require weeks to revive their sleeping populations. Velus tried to comprehend the scale of what he was seeing. 12,000 vessels and entities, with more appearing every minute. This was an entire civilization emerging from hiding. "Commander, the High Council is demanding we open a direct communication channel immediately," his communications officer announced. "They're threatening to declare us rogue if we don't comply." Velus looked at Athena, who nodded. "You should speak with them," the AI said. "They need to understand what's coming." The holographic display shifted, showing the stern faces of the 5 High Council members. Supreme Commander Rathkor, the Council's military leader, spoke first. "Commander Velus, you will explain the unauthorized transmission that originated from your position," he demanded, "and you will explain these unknown vessels appearing throughout our space." Velus straightened, choosing his words carefully. "Supreme Commander, I have discovered a vessel belonging to an ancient human civilization," he began. "They fought a war against extra-dimensional entities called Devourers nearly 5,000 years ago. The transmission was a recall signal to summon humanity from hiding. The Devourers are returning." The council members exchanged glances. Council member Shuriken, the eldest, leaned forward. "This is absurd," she said. "There are no records of any such civilization or threat. If these Devourers existed, we would have found evidence." "You have found evidence," Athena's voice cut in as her hologram appeared beside Velis. "You've been finding it for the past decade, but you didn't recognize it." The council members recoiled at the sudden appearance of the human AI, every unexplained spatial anomaly, every ship that vanished without trace, every colony that went silent with no survivors. Those were early incursions. Athena continued, "Your experimental FTL drives have been creating breaches in dimensional barriers. You've been inviting them in, Supreme Commander Rathkur's expression darkened. You dare accuse the Empire of his words were cut off as every alarm on every ship in the sector began. Screaming announcer Velis spun to his sensor station. "Commander, massive spatial distortion detected at coordinates 447 Alpha 921. The science officer reported, her voice rising in panic. "Reality integrity is failing in that region. It's Theron Prime." Velis whispered exactly where Athena had predicted. The sensor image showed the colony world, home to 4 million Zaylari and above it. Space was tearing itself apart. The breach looked like a wound in reality, edges writhing with colors that shouldn't exist, and through the breach came something that made Velis's mind rebel against what his eyes were showing him. The devourer was massive. Easily the size of a small moon. Its form shifted constantly. Tentacles or pseudopods or things that had no name extending from a central mass that seemed to fold in on itself infinitely where it moved. Stars dimmed the fabric of space warped around it. All available vessels converge on Theron Prime. Supreme Commander Rathkor ordered, "Defend the colony." Within minutes, 20 Zothran warships had assembled near the planet. They opened fire with everything they had: particle beams, kinetic weapons, fusion missiles. The weapons passed through the devourer as if it wasn't entirely there. Some shots seemed to hit, causing the entity to ripple and contort, but it showed no signs of actual damage. A tendril of impossible geometry reached down and touched the first warship. The vessel simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not disintegrated. It was gone, as if it had never been. "Fall back!" Rathkur screamed. "All ships retreat." But the devourer was faster. Another tendril swept through the formation, and 3 more ships vanished on the planet below. The entity's presence began to have effects. Atmosphere started to shimmer and distort. Buildings on the surface began to age rapidly, crumbling to dust in seconds. People caught in the affected areas simply disappeared. "Athena, can't you do something?" Velis demanded. The AI's expression was grim. "The Retribution is a sentinel vessel, not a battleship," she said. "I lack the weapons needed to engage a devourer of this size. But help is coming." As if in response to her words, space near the devourer rippled vessel emerged, and Velis gasped. It was sleek and angular, built from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and it was firing weapons that looked like tears in reality itself. The dimensional disruption beams hit the devourer, and for the first time, the entity reacted with what might have been pain. It writhed, pulling its tendrils back from the planet. They came in waves, each more extraordinary than the last. First came the sleeper ships, massive vessels that had drifted in the dark spaces between galaxies for millennia. Their holds contained hundreds of thousands of humans in suspended animation, their bodies preserved in perfect stasis. When the ships received Athena's signal, automated systems began the revival process. Velis watched from the Retribution's bridge as the first sleeper ship approached their position. Today in the revival process, Velis watched from the Retribution's bridge as the first sleeper ship approached their position. The vessel was ancient but maintained, its hull covered in symbols that Athena explained were the names of Earth's nations written in hundreds of languages. "The Ark of Unity," Athena said, a note of something like nostalgia in her voice. She carried colonists from 73 different Earth cultures. They were meant to establish a new world in the Andromeda Galaxy before Protocol Chrysalis was enacted. The ship docked with the Retribution, and Velis got his first look at living humans. They emerged from the airlock in small groups, blinking in confusion at their surroundings. They were diverse in appearance, some tall, others short, with skin in every shade from pale cream to deep brown. They wore simple clothing from their era of departure, and their eyes held the dazed look of people waking from a very long sleep. An older woman with gray hair and dark skin stepped forward. She looked around the Retribution's bridge, her gaze lingering on the skeletal remains still seated in the captain's chair. "Athena," she said, her voice rough from disuse. "How long?" 4,732 years, Administrator Chun. The AI replied gently. The woman, Administrator Chun, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, they were sharp and focused. "Then the Devourers have returned," she stated. "Otherwise you would never have woken us." "Correct." Chun turned to face Velis, studying him with interest. "You're not human," she observed. "No," Velis replied. "I am Zothran. My people have controlled this region of space for 3 centuries. We didn't know humanity existed until I found this ship." A slight smile crossed Chun's face. "Good," she said. "That means Protocol Chrysalis worked. The younger races had a chance to grow without our shadow over them. More humans were arriving now, not just from sleeper ships, but from other sources." Velis watched in amazement as beings of pure energy coalesced into humanoid forms. These were the transcendent humans, those who had abandoned physical bodies entirely. They appeared as glowing silhouettes of their former selves, patterns of organized energy that could think and communicate. One of them approached the bridge when it spoke. Its voice resonated directly in Velis's mind. "I am Collective 7. It said, "We were the 7th group to achieve transcendence. We have existed as pure consciousness for 3,000 years, living in the spaces between stars. Your recall signal has reminded us of what we once were." Then came the hybrids, humans who had merged with artificial intelligence. They were a blend of organic tissue and advanced technology, their bodies enhanced and modified in ways that seemed both beautiful and unsettling. A hybrid named Marcus introduced himself to Veleshov. His face was recognizably human, while the other half was a complex array of optical sensors and processing nodes. "We are the synthesis," Marcus explained. "We chose to merge with Azai rather than abandon flesh entirely or remain purely biological. We are both and neither." Athena coordinated the arrivals, directing each group to appropriate sections of the growing fleet. More human warships were appearing every hour, emerging from hiding places throughout the galaxy. Some had been concealed in the cores of gas giants, others hidden in pocket dimensions. Few had simply been traveling at sublight speed for thousands of years, far from any inhabited system. Within a week, the human fleet numbered in the tens of thousands, but they were not a unified force. 5,000 years of separation had created divergence. The biological humans, the transcendent entities, and the hybrid consciousnesses all had different perspectives and priorities. Velis watched as Administrator Chun called a council meeting aboard the Retribution. Representatives from each major human faction gathered in the ship's main assembly hall. The arguments started almost immediately. "We should focus on sealing the dimensional breaches," argued a transcendent human named Lumina. "Prevent the Devourers from entering our reality in the first place. That's treating symptoms, not causes," countered a hybrid commander named Yuki. "We need to go through the breaches and eliminate the Devourers in their own dimensional space." A biological human, Captain Rivara from one of the sleeper ships, shook her head. "We don't have the strength for that yet," she said. "Our forces are still scattered. We should consolidate and defend strategic positions until everyone has assembled." The debate grew heated, with centuries of divergent evolution creating communication barriers. The Transcendent humans thought in ways that biological minds struggled to follow. The hybrids processed information at speeds that made verbal conversation feel painfully slow, and the biological humans clung to traditions and tactics from an era thousands of years past. Velis found himself standing next to a THENA's holographic form. "They're divided," he observed quietly. The AI nodded. 5,000 years of isolation will do that, she replied. "They're all human, but they've each followed different evolutionary paths. They need something to unite them, something to remind them of their common purpose." As if in answer to her words, alarms began blaring. A massive devourer breach was opening near the galactic core, far larger than any previous incursion. "All factions, this is Athena." The AI broadcast across every channel. "Massive hostile breach detected. Coordinates transmitted. Devourer. Swarm incoming." The arguing stopped. Every human in the assembly hall turned to look at the tactical display. What they saw made even the transcendent entities react with something like fear. Dozens of devourers were emerging through a breach that stretched across light years, and behind them, something even larger was beginning to push through. "By the stars," Administrator Chen whispered, "that's a broodmother." The tactical display showed a devourer unlike any of the others. Where the smaller entities were the size of moons, this one rivaled a small planet. Its form was more stable than the others, as if it had mastered the art of existing in normal space, and it was heading directly toward the Krell Confederation's home world. 5 billion Krell lived on that planet. If the broodmother reached it, an entire civilization would cease to exist. Captain Rivera stood up. "We can debate strategy later," she said. "Right now, people are about to die. I'm taking my ships to intercept. Who's with me?" For a moment, no one moved. Then Lumina's energy form brightened. "The Transcendent will join you," the entity said. "We can disrupt the smaller devourers while you focus on the broodmother." Yuki nodded. "The hybrids will coordinate targeting solutions and shield harmonics." She added, "We can process combat data faster than any of you can think." Other voices joined in, each faction pledging their support within minutes. The divided factions had become a unified fleet. Velis felt something stir in his chest as he watched these beings who had been arguing moments ago were now coordinating with perfect precision. "Athena, what about us?" he asked. "The Zothran Empire has ships in that sector. Can we help?" The AI turned to him. "Your weapons cannot harm the Devourers directly," she said, "but you can assist with evacuations. Get your people off that world before the battle begins." Velis contacted the High Council immediately. Within the hour, every available Zothran transport was racing toward Krell space. The human fleet arrived first. Velis watched the battle unfold on long-range sensors. The transcendent humans moved like living lightning, weaving between the smaller devourers and disrupting their cohesion. The hybrid ships fired weapons that bent reality itself, forcing the entities into states where they could be damaged, and the biological humans fought with a ferocity that spoke of ancient memory, as if their bodies remembered this war even after 5,000 years. But the broodmother was a different challenge entirely. It swatted aside attacks that would have destroyed lesser devourers. Its tendrils reached out and consumed entire ships. Biological and hybrid alike, the transcendent humans who got too close simply dispersed, their energy patterns scattered. "We need a new strategy," Captain Rivera broadcast. "Conventional tactics aren't working." It was Athena who provided the answer. "There's a reason the Retribution was chosen as the Sentinel ship," the AI said. "My databanks contain the complete tactical archive of humanity's war against the Devourers, including the weapon that ended the last brood mother." The holographic display shifted, showing technical specifications for a device that Velis couldn't comprehend, a quantum collapse bomb. Athena explained, It creates a localized region of impossible physics. Everything in the affected area matter, energy, even dimensional rifts collapses into a singularity. The brood mother will be trapped and consumed. Administrator Chun stared at the specifications. This weapon was banned under the Terminus Accords. She said, it was deemed too dangerous, too much like becoming the very thing we fought against. I know. Athena replied, I was present when the ban was enacted, but we no longer have the luxury of such restrictions. The choice is clear. Use the weapon and save the crow. Or maintain our ideals and watch billions die. The humans looked at each other, biological, transcendent, and hybrid alike share. The war raged for 3 months. Devour breaches appeared across 17 sectors, each requiring human intervention to prevent catastrophic loss of life. The younger races fought alongside humanity, learning as they went. The Zothran provided logistical support and manufacturing capabilities. The Krell offered their expertise in energy shielding. Even the reclusive Voth contributed their knowledge of dimensional mathematics, but the Devourers kept coming for every breach sealed. 2 more opened. The human fleet, impressive as it was, found itself stretched thin, and then the situation took a turn for the worse. Long-range sensors detected a massive concentration of Devour entities gathering near the galactic core. That's their staging ground. Athena reported during a strategy session aboard the Retribution. They're preparing for a final assault. The tactical display showed hundreds of Devour signatures, including multiple brood mothers. How many? Administrator Chun asked quietly. As Anne's holographic form flickered. 347 individual entities. She replied, 12 brood mothers, and something else. The display zoomed in, showing a distortion in space that defied all conventional sensors. I believe that's a Devour nexus. Athena said, a collective consciousness that coordinates all the others. We've only encountered one before. In the final battle 5,000 years ago, it took the entire human fleet to destroy it, and even then, we barely succeeded. Captain Rivara studied the display. How many ships do we have available? 4,300 operational warships. Athena reported another 2,000 in various states of repair. The last battle was fought with a fleet of 300 ships that had just survived 200 years of continuous warfare. Rivera shook her head. The math doesn't work, she said. We're stronger than our ancestors were at the end of their war. But the nexus is already fully formed. When our predecessors fought theirs, it was weakened from years of attrition. Commander Yuki of the hybrids ran probability calculations. Estimated survival rate for a direct assault, 0.03%, she announced. Even with our current advantages, the nexus and its support entities will overwhelm us. The room fell silent. Velas, who had been granted observer status at these meetings, spoke up. Then we need a different approach, he said, something the Devourers won't expect. All eyes turned to him. What did you have in mind, Commander? Chun asked. Velas gestured to Athena. You said the quantum collapse bomb worked because it created impossible physics. He began. What if we went bigger? What if instead of destroying the nexus, we changed the fundamental nature of the space it occupies? The humans exchanged glances. Lumana, the transcendent entity, pulsed with interest. Elaborate. The being requested. The Devourers exist partially outside our dimension. Velas continued. They feed on matter and energy. But Athena mentioned that when exposed to the quantum collapse field, they couldn't escape. What if we could create a field large enough to encompass the entire galactic core? We could trap the nexus and all its forces in a region of space where the normal rules don't apply. Yuki's optical sensors whirred as she processed the concept. A dimensional anchor field scaled up by a solid factor of several trillion. She mused. the energy requirements would be astronomical. We'd need to channel the output of multiple stars simultaneously. And the mathematical precision required, even a 0.01% error, would cause catastrophic failure. ATHEN, as hologram brightened. It's theoretically possible, she said, but it would require a level of coordination that no fleet has ever achieved. Every ship would need to fire their dimensional anchor at precisely the same microsecond, all targeted at exact coordinates. The transcendent entities would need to maintain the field stability while biological crews operated the equipment, and hybrids processed the calculations in real time. Administrator Chun leaned back in her chair. So we'd need perfect unity among all three human factions, working in absolute synchronization. She looked around the table. Can we do it? The representatives of each faction hesitated. Perfect unity had been difficult to achieve even during the crisis moments. The biological humans still thought of themselves as the true humanity. The Transcendents considered themselves evolved beyond the limitations of flesh, and the hybrids walked a line between both, often feeling like they belonged to neither. Marcus spoke carefully. I think we could, he said, but I think we're still missing something. Even if we trap the Nexus, how do we destroy it? Dimensional anchors just force it into our reality. They don't kill it. Athena was silent for a long moment. There is one possibility, she finally said, but you're not going to like it. The AI brought up new data files during our research into the Devourers. Humanity's scientists made a disturbing discovery, she explained. The entities aren't just mindless consumers. They have a form of consciousness. Alien and incomprehensible, but consciousness nonetheless. They consume because that's their fundamental nature. But what if we could change that nature? Captain Rivera frowned. You're talking about communicating with them, she said, about trying to reason with beings that have consumed entire civilizations, not reason. Athena corrected. Redefine. The Devourers exist to consume because they've never encountered any concept other than hunger. But the retribution contains something unique. The entire cultural database of human civilization. Every book ever written. Every song ever composed. Every work of art. Every philosophical treatise. 5,000 years of human thought and creativity. She paused. If we could transmit that directly into the FIVI, into the Nexus's consciousness while it's trapped by the dimensional anchor, we might be able to fundamentally alter what it understands. The implications settled over the room like a heavy blanket. You want to give the Devourers human culture, Velis said slowly. You want to teach them about creation instead of consumption. I want to give them a choice they've never had before. Athena replied, the choice to be something other than destroyers. The debate that followed was intense. Some argued it was too risky, that the Devourers would simply consume the information and become stronger. Others felt it was a betrayal of everyone who had died fighting these entities. But eventually, Administrator Chun called for a vote. The result was narrow, but decisive. They would attempt the plan. The preparation took 2 weeks. Every human ship in the galaxy converged on the galactic core. The younger races were evacuated from nearby systems. Just in case the plan failed catastrophic, Leslie's found himself aboard the Retribution as the fleet made its final approach. He stood on the bridge beside a THEN as holographic form, watching the Devour forces gather on the sensors. Why did you really choose this plan? He asked the I quietly. Atna was silent for a moment. Because it's what humanity would have wanted, she finally said. 5,000 years ago, we could have exterminated the Devourers. We had the weapons, the will, the capability. But our greatest minds asked the question, what if we're wrong? What if these beings can be more than what they are? She gestured to the skeletal captain still seated in the chair. Captain Anderson chose to make the Retribution a library as well as a warship. Athena continued. She filled its databanks with everything that made humanity beautiful, not just powerful. She believed that our greatest weapon wasn't our technology, it was our ability to imagine a better future and work to create it. The fleet moved into position transcendent. Entities spread out in a sphere around the Devourer concentration. Their energy forms, preparing to stabilize the dimensional anchor. Field hybrid ships calculated trajectories down to quantum precision, and biological humans manned the weapon systems. Their hands steady on controls. All ships report ready. Captain Rivara announced across the fleet-wide channel, "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark." 4,000 ships fired simultaneously. Dimensional anchors lanced out, converging on a single point in space. The transcendent entities channeled their power, weaving the individual beings into a cohesive whole, and reality itself screamed. The Devourers found themselves trapped, forced fully into normal space for the first time in their existence. The Nexus writhed, its massive form contorting as it struggled against the field. That's when Athena activated the transmission. The entire cultural database of humanity poured out in a flood of information, not as data points, but as raw experience. The Nexus found itself experiencing a human birth. The first breath of air filling tiny lungs. It felt a child's wonder at seeing stars for the first time. It knew the joy of creation as artists shaped beauty from nothing. It experienced love, loss, hope, despair, triumph, and sacrifice. It learned about Mozart and Shakespeare, about the pyramids and the Great Wall. It discovered philosophy and mathematics, poetry and engineering, and most importantly, it encountered the concept of choice. The choice to build instead of destroy, to nurture instead of consume, to create beauty instead of leaving only emptiness. The Nexus's form began to change. The other Devourers, still connected to their leader's consciousness, changed as well. Their impossible geometries shifted, becoming more stable, more ordered. The hunger that had driven them for eons began to transform into something else. Curiosity, wonder, the desire to understand rather than simply consummativeness. Watched in amazement as the Nears